first of all, I'm a writer. And secondly, I'm a teacher. That's it. Actually, I write wherever I find the opportunity to do so. I've trained myself to write under any circumstances, so I write at home while waiting for, well, now I live alone because my husband has passed away and my only daughter who lived with me has also passed away, so I live at home. So I write whenever I want. At breakfast, while waiting to fall asleep, while having lunch, whenever I have time. Here, while waiting for my students to finish their exam. You know, I don't romanticize writing. I've been a writer since I was 9. I wrote, I kept a diary since I was 8, I think. My mother gave me one of those little books with a little key when I was 8. When I was 9, I wrote and I used to write family newspapers. They were like, I would get bond paper, I would draw lines, and then these were columns, right?
Yes.
And then I would write the news myself, like, Lola went to the movies today, stuff like that. And then when I was 9, I wrote a novel. I called it a novel. It was a notebook, one of those ring-bound notebooks. I don't know if you are familiar with a spiral notebook ang tawag.
Yes, yes.
It had like wire here in
Yes,
the,
I also like those.
Okay. I would write longhand, and there were no computers then, of course, and I didn't know how to type yet. I wrote everything in longhand, and then I illustrated it myself. What I did is I copied the books that I was reading at that time. We had no such thing as the animal, what do you call it now? What do you call it? Young adult fiction.
Young adult
That animal did not exist in my time. There were children's books, and then there were adult books, and these were considered children's books. They were Little Women,
Oh,
Anne of Green Gables, Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm, Pollyanna, that stuff. So I just copied that kind of plot. So of course my character had to be blonde and blue-eyed and live in a house by a brook in a village called Avonlea or something like that. Yeah, so that's how I started writing. Well, when I was in high school, I worked for the student paper, of course. I think I began as a reporter, then became a literary editor, and then editor-in-chief. This was St. Paul College in Quezon City before it became a university. It was only up to high school. I have 40 books. Anyway, Catch a Falling Star contains it's fiction, but it's based very closely on my life in a convent school, so that's pretty much my life. I wanted to go to UP, but my mother was dead set against it because the Catholic Church had launched a campaign against UP, mainly based on the fact that there was a philosophy professor, very well-known intellectual, who made no bones about the fact that he was an atheist. And my mother thought, my God, UP, you will become an communist and an atheist and you will lose your virginity. And the crazy thing was both she and my father were UP graduates, but they wouldn't hear of it, so I was brought here where she taught here for a while. And she introduced me to the Spanish. At the time, UST was run by Spanish friars pa eh. Ngayon, they're all Filipinos na. But at that time, they were Spanish priests. And she, in fact, knew some of them personally. And she introduced me to the Dean of Women, who, my plan was to take journalism. Mm-hmm. And at the time, there was a college here, which was very well known. The writing college, they called it. Very small, and it had only 2 majors, philosophy and journalism. So I was going to take journalism since I thought writing really meant becoming a reporter. And the Dean of Women said, but at the time, I forgot to tell you, I was already writing for the national magazines. By the time I was second year high school, I published my first essay in a national magazine that is now dead. It was called Filipino Home Companion. So the Dean of Women said, what's the point of taking journalism if you're already writing for the papers? You must take philosophy so that your writing will have substance. I had no idea what philosophy was, so I'm like, okay.
Okay.
So I took up philosophy,
Okay.
and I don't regret it. It was a wonderful experience. That I think my my reading and my writing, both the not just my work as a writer, but my work as a teacher, is very much influenced by the women who taught me, mainly the women. I learned how to teach and how to write because of those women. We had no creative writing classes in those years, no creative writing workshops, but our teachers were well aware that their classrooms were populated by people who wanted to be writers. And we took our classes together because it was a small college.
Okay.
So we couldn't have the, there was a policy here of segregation of men and women. The ambition to become a writer came first from my mother, who was one of the Philippines' first Filipino newspaper women. Yeah, writing pre-war, meaning pre-Japanese war, yeah. So she gave up college actually when she was offered a job at the, what was it? I think the Philippine Herald, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, so she was very, for her generation, this was unheard of.
Yes.
And I think the only time the only reason it happened is her father was dead. She surrounded me with books from early on.
Yes.
No.
Classes. Never. So
Yeah.
you just you were informed by what you read.
Yeah, and
That's good.
we read a lot, you know. We were not distracted by cell phones and the like. Until I was in, I think, college, there was no TV.
Yes.
So most of the time I was reading. I don't know how many books I've read in my life. And that's where I learned to write, from reading wonderful literature. Of course, when I was in college, I belonged to the college paper, the Blue Quill. I always dreamt of being a novelist, but I did not get up the courage to submit a short story to the magazines until it was sometime in 1978, I think. I had no idea whether my work was good or not until I came home. When I came home, I went back to writing fiction. And that's when I started winning awards and so on. And then I turned to the fairy tale, the modern fairy tale. And yeah, that's the, it's funny, you know, when UST decided that they wanted to, kasi all my books are out of print, and except for the new ones, no, these ones, the memoir, the travel essays, they're still in print, but all the fiction is out of print. So, except for Catch a Falling Star, which is required in some schools. So, when somebody here, one of my colleagues here, it was his idea. He was telling me, I don't know where to get a copy of your short stories. I'm sick of reading about Patricia Payatot. That's the heroine of Catch a Falling Star. Isn't it time for a collected story, sabi niya. So we got, that idea was born, and the publishing house was very enthusiastic. So I got permission from all my publishers. And then, except Catch a Falling Star, the publisher wouldn't give me permission, and she's my good friend, Andrea Pasion Flores. But I understood her reason. She said, it's still in print. We're still pushing it aggressively.
Yes.
Oh, one of my writer friends said to me, you know, you can. All you have to do is add, and she said, you're under contract. But this other writer friend said, all you have to do is add one story. And that's no longer the same book. So you can, and I did have 2 stories which were not part of the book. But I thought, why would I want to quarrel with my publisher and with my friend? You know? So I said, okay, I understand. I won't, kaya lang yung collected stories that's missing one book is incomplete. But I said, okay lang. And then I gave her the story that had not yet been published for her to include because she told me we're going to come out later. Now when I said sige, I accept your decision, then she sent her assistant to call me up to say we're actually going to come up with an anniversary edition of your book because it's been in print for 20 years and we'll make it a new edition. You can correct anything you want, add anything you want. So that's coming out to, so okay na. No? Anyway, maybe we're at the beginning of a new type of genre that we have no name for yet, but which is a kind of development from the personal essay, which the net has transformed into something else. I think that anything that a Filipino writes is Filipino. Because whether you like it or not, it will be. Even if you write it in English, even if you've been influenced by your life in New York or whatever, that will still be Filipino. And then Filipinos are very creative, so I have no doubt. Definitely, I'm very optimistic that Filipinos will forge ahead and invent new forms that will be Filipino in whatever language they work. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that we all, whatever our professions might be, have a role to play. It should be responsible for playing a role, which is our contribution to our society. And it is our responsibility to find out what that is. I think the role of the writer differs with the times.
Yes.
The role of the writer then would have been very different from what it has to be now. First of all, I think it's important to record it. We have already seen what has happened because there were not enough people who recorded martial law and what it was really like. And then now, I don't know if you're included among them, but I know hordes of young people who believe that martial law was a good time for the Philippines. That should not happen, and it would not have happened if the writers living at the time had written it. Then, to go on writing in the best possible way so that literature does not die, because there have been periods when it has, as in the Dark Ages, where it actually disappeared, di ba? No, it was in fact, and here I'm quoting Nick Joaquin, wrote, when he won the Ramon Magsaysay Award, he wrote an essay called Literature versus Journalism, which I think is one of the most important literary documents to be produced. Unfortunately, not enough people have read it. And in it, he claims there's absolutely no difference. Journalism can be of the highest quality, such as it was when he was writing for the Free Press. We now, for a time it was called New Journalism, later Literary Journalism, now Creative Nonfiction. Only it is different in terms of its techniques, its strategies. No, it's not. I think it has morphed. It is part of the, I mean, it's online. People have blogs. They use their social media for posting. Of course, most of the posts are not literary at all. No? But those who are literary cannot help but write in a literary way. You know, I must confess something to you. Even my status report, I edit that. Sometimes 3 or 4 times. I can't stand something there that isn't exactly the way it should be written. So
even Instagram captions.
yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I don't think it will die. The arts don't die, but they morph.